Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. Now, not so long ago, I posted a review of the Kafir Project, which is an excellent sci-fi mystery thriller by Lee Burvine. It's also known as the Kafir Project. That was its original title. I didn't realise it at the time, but a new edition has just come out under the revised title of the Kuffar Project. Anyway, I thought this novel is a bit of a hidden gem. It's very exciting, it's thought-provoking, it's got some very interesting themes like archaeology, applied physics, observational time travel, and perhaps most controversially, critical investigation of the historicity of religion. So, following the new release, I picked up a copy of the new edition. Now, I originally listened to the audiobook, but this is the new release with this rather intriguing ocular cover design here. And I got in touch with the author to see if he'd be interested in having a chat to discuss his book. He was very happy to do so, but he prefers to keep his identity anonymous. Lee Burvine is his pen name. So for this reason, the interview that follows is audio only. Lee Burvine, welcome. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Robin. Thank you very much.
Great. So today we're going to talk about your novel, The Kuffar Project. I listened to this via audiobook a few weeks ago. I really enjoyed it. And now I've picked up a physical copy of the new edition. So I'm sure I'm going to give it a reread at some point. So your book, it straddles quite a few genres.
Yeah, that wasn't intentional. And I really didn't know that especially, I didn't realize that I was writing a mystery as I was writing it. That's just how it came out.
Right. So it's definitely a mystery, but it's also, obviously it's a thriller and it's science fiction.
Yeah.
And we've got an overarching atheistic theme, right?
It's a didactic book, unapologetically. Yes, it has a point to make.
Right. But before we sort of get into that, as this is primarily a sci-fi focused channel, I just wanted to ask you about your interest in sci-fi. Do you have any background interest in science fiction?
It was what I started reading when I started reading fiction. I fell in love with all the old masters. I remember reading Asimov's Foundation trilogy. And in fact, a friend of mine were joking that when people said the trilogy, they were talking about Tolkien, but we were always talking about Asimov. And I was a huge fan of Fahrenheit 451 because Bradbury's themes were so terribly important. And then I just actually read some things about how he wrote that downstairs in a library on a manual typewriter that he was feeding dimes into because he didn't have his own typewriter.
Wow.
And so those were big influence. Heinlein was a huge influence on me. Clarke. I remember falling in love with Stranger in a Strange Land, and Childhood's End blew me away. All of those classics, really. And then I go far enough back that I was reading Omni magazine, and which was something. Who was it? The publisher of, I think, Penthouse actually put out Omni magazine, a science fiction magazine, and it was there that I started reading William Gibson, because I think Burning Chrome was in Omni magazine, and eventually I started reading all of his. I have a paperback copy of Mona Lisa Overdrive that is falling apart from having been read so many times. His prose is just, the power of his imagination is staggering. But on top of that, the man is just a damn good writer. I remember a line about crows hopping on the moonscape of his mother's madness and thinking, oh my God, what a beautiful sentence. He just carves his his prose out of stone. It's amazing. So, and more recently, I fell in love with Mary Doria Russell. If you haven't read The Sparrow and Children of God, they're two of the finest science fiction books that anyone has ever written. Certainly the best alien encounter books and the world building. And she was actually a physical anthropologist who wrote nonfiction books and then sat down to write this novel and somehow came out with The Sparrow, which was profound and beautiful, and the characters are amazing, and it's tragic and lovely, and just wow, another book that I keep rereading and rereading. And of course Crichton has been a big influence. I mean, I started reading Crichton with the Andromeda Strain and just kept taking in everything that he put out. He's amazing.
Right. Yes. I have read The Sparrow.
Yeah.
Thought it was amazing. I've not read Children of God, though.
It's not really a sequel. It's essentially the second half of one book that would have been way too long had she put them out together. But I consider them really essentially to be one book.
Okay.
Just amazing.
Right. Yeah, some great authors there.
Yeah.
So, the Kuffar Project, how would you introduce this book?
Well, it's certainly speculative fiction, and it's it's often compared to Dan Brown, in that there's a lot of religious controversy in it. I tried to ground the story as best I could in peer-reviewed research and good textual criticism and solid archaeology. And it's a story with a big what if. I think the nascence of it really was thinking about how ultra-modern religions, we can reach back and we can kind of look at the origins and we can see, this is not exactly how the Orthodox story goes. I mean, you can read court transcripts of Joseph Smith being tried for being a fraud, for defrauding people, telling them that he could help them find gold by putting magic stones in a hat, and he pled guilty. He's yes, I made it all up. And likewise, you can look at Scientology and the famous quote about, if I wanted to get rich, I'd start a religion. But the Abrahamic religions, their origins they're lost in time. We don't have that much empirical evidence that we can go back and check out the historicity of those stories. And I just wondered, well, what if we could? What if we could see the origins of the great religions? What would we find? And what would that do to modern religion? And who might that really, get in the way of their agenda? Who might want to stop that? And that's really where the story begins. And then, giving away a little bit. It's an odd thing about trying to promote the book without saying what the premise is, because really, I think it's best if you come to it with no expectations and no knowledge at all. But you have to tell people something about the book to entice them. And so right now, I think the Facebook ad says, imagine a world where religious history is no longer a mystery. And that's the come on line.
Right. And for people interested in science fiction, which is generally the viewers of this channel,
yeah,
I think they will probably be very interested to know, well, how do you do that? How do you investigate the historicity of religion? Now, we don't need to go into detail here.
Right. But there's I will confess to a little bit of hand waving there. I think in a lot of even really, very hard sci-fi, there's a ticket that you have to pay for the ride, which is to say that something like time travel is possible, or something like faster than light travel is possible. And then we accept that so we can get on with having a really good story with characters we care about, whose lives are changing. the technology, as I present it, has something to do with manipulating the Higgs field in a way that had never been done before, so that space-time could be bent into closed loops. And there's nothing exactly wrong about that, but it's a little bit like who's the great physicist who said that it's not even wrong? I mean, I'm being intentionally vague because the technology, of course, it doesn't exist. But I wanted to create something plausible, and closed time like loops were, to me, it's like, okay, yeah, that's, if you could bend space time in a loop, you'd be seeing the past. So there's something there.
Right. I'm actually listening to an audiobook at the minute, which is non-fiction. It's about the philosophy and science of time travel, and it really goes deep into these concepts.
Yeah.
But I'm more interested in just the idea as a plot device rather than the science or the physics of it. So,
right, yeah.
Without going into any detail or spoilers here, the phrase I like to use is observational time travel.
Exactly, that's right. And what I liked about observational time travel, as opposed to physical time travel, is that it does help you move away from this idea of upsetting the timeline and creating a new timeline and getting into the whole many worlds hypothesis. So, the conceit is that with observational time travel, you're never going to have the grandfather paradox. Nothing like that. You're not going to have, step on a butterfly and suddenly all the world's language is altered just a little bit. We're eliminating that as a possible plot complication.
Okay, and you've chosen for your protagonist a man called Gavin Rees, who's a kind of TV scientist, science communicator.
Right. He is based basically on Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he is like them. He's an astronomer and a science communicator. I just thought it would be really fun to have a scientist who doesn't know, has never held a gun in his entire life, hasn't been in a fist fight since the second grade, who's just the complete opposite of Jack Reacher, who's going to be a thriller hero and is going to be fighting assassins, and he's going to be getting into jams and thinking his way out of them. Time and time again in the story, his background as a science communicator, as a scientist, and the arcane knowledge that he possesses actually, saves his butt. And to me, that was just really fun. And, it's a bit like Dan Brown's lead character, Robert Langdon, is it, who, Brown constructs these plots where the only person who can save the day is somebody who can solve a lot of puzzles. And his hero is a puzzle solver. So it's that kind of structure that I always enjoyed. And I thought I could do that with a science communicator, and it would be, something that I had never seen before.
Yeah. So, how did you come up with the idea for this book or this project originally?
Really, it was just this thought that, we can see the origins of our more modern religions, but the Abrahamic religions in particular are kind of lost in the past. And just this, this wonderful what if popped into my head. What if it was different? What if we could know? There's certain things that we do know now. For example, regarding the origins of Judaism, we know that there was never an exodus. It didn't happen. There's no archaeological evidence of some influx of population. In fact, our best understanding is that the early Israelites were in fact Canaanites. They didn't come in and conquer Canaan. They were a Canaanite tribe that separated themselves through their own new religious mythology. And and then eventually. So we do have you could call we have hard evidence that the origin myths of Judaism are myths. There's stories. When it comes to Christianity and Islam, we there's just absolutely no evidence there that corroborates or refutes. I mean, we can look at the text and we can see things that are obviously man-made. For instance, I always thought it was fascinating to watch the role of John the Baptist change from the earliest Gospels to the latest Gospels. At the time the earliest Gospels were being written, John the Baptist had more followers than Jesus did, and they were politically important. You needed to be aligned with them, and so John the Baptist is this very important character. He is identified as Elijah reincarnated, which is Elijah was a very important prophet, so he's come back. That's in Mark. By the time you get to John, not only is he saying, I'm not fit to tie your sandal, but he's actively denying that he is actually Elijah. He's in John the Baptist. No, I'm not Elijah. In Mark, he is Elijah. So what happened? Well, what happened was the Jesus movement gained steam, and the John the Baptist movement had fallen away. So we didn't need them anymore. So suddenly we had to kind of downplay his role and everything. So, there are lots of hints that this stuff is man-made. But really what kicked off the story was this idea of, what if there was certainty? What would happen? And a lot of readers have said, including Lawrence Krauss, who wrote a lovely introduction for me, there's too much invested in organized religion. There's too much money and power there for them ever to accept anything. Regardless of what, you could find the bones of Jesus, and there would be some way of denying it or rationalizing it. These institutions aren't going anywhere. And as I begin working on finally on another Gavin Rees adventure, the world has in fact not changed, despite what Gavin has discovered and what evidence has come forward. And this is the way it would go.
Right. Although I think it would still undermine faiths in quite a profound way.
For some people, certainly. I read a great quote that, when an honest man finds out he's wrong, he either changes his mind or he ceases to be an honest man. Those are your paths. That's what's available to you. And right now, the leadership of the Mormon Church is they're flogging this message that you should stay off the internet. And what you learn from us is all the truth you need. And the internet is the worst thing that ever happened to Mormonism. So many people are deconstructing and moving away just based on facts that they find on ex-Mormon websites. Things like the Book of Abraham. Joseph Smith bought some papyrus from a salesman of ancient artifacts, and he translated it, and he found that it was actually the patriarch Abraham who wrote this papyrus, and he wrote about the tribes in Israel, the tribes that were going to be in the New World, and I mean all this stuff. So he Joseph Smith does this elaborate translation, and then the original papyrus was destroyed in a fire. Nothing nefarious about that. It was in a museum and it burnt down. And then, quite recently, it was recovered. A large portion of it was actually recovered, the very papyrus that Joseph Smith translated. And when Egyptologists translated it, obviously Joseph Smith's translation had nothing to do with what was on the papyrus. It was, it was a funerary scroll of some kind. It had nothing to do with Abraham. It was Egyptian, and you're not going to hear about that from church elders. You're going to go on the internet and you're going to find out that it was recovered and it was translated by experts and that Joseph Smith was a fraud. And so it's the worst thing that ever happened to them.
Right.
And it's funny, I've actually seen a graph of the usage of the internet graphed against Mormon disbelief, and they're in lockstep.
Yes, I'm sure that may apply to various other sects and cults as well.
Well, sure, and that's this. Gavin Reese, the protagonist of the story, is an ex-Mormon.
Right. Yeah.
And it's something that he said on a radio show that actually gave Edward Fisher, the physicist who creates the technology, this whole idea that, we could see the origins of Mormonism. What if we could see the origins of the Abrahamic religions? And it's actually something that Gavin Reese says that plants the seed in Fisher's mind.
Okay. So you originally self-published this book back in 2016.
Yeah.
And more recently, you've revised it and republished it this year, right. 2025.
Yeah.
And the title has been altered slightly from the Kafir Project to the Kuffar Project.
Right. Kafir is an Arabic word which means unbeliever or infidel. Kuffar is just the plural of the same word. It means unbelievers with the S. I didn't know when I first published the book that the word kafir had been corrupted in South Africa, where it's spelt with two F's and pronounced kafir, into a racial slur. Through the etymology of that is really strange. It has to do with the fact in Islam that you can't have Islamic slaves. So it was black tribes, Islamic tribes who were enslaving other Africans, but they could only enslave the kafir, the unbelievers. So from that, kafir came to be synonymous with just slave, and later with blacks in general, and it became a slur word. It's in South Africa, it's like the N-word. And so my book was being blocked. I couldn't publicize it. I was getting kicked off MailChimp and an email service, and I had to explain to Amazon, no, it's not the same word. It's one F, not two. It's a common Arabic word. It appears dozens, if not hundreds of times in the Quran. And they said, well, okay, we'll let you do it. But when I thought of republishing, I knew that I had to make some change. So I thought with that minor change, people would, recognize that, yes, this is the same book. And of course, I had to update the quantum computer technology, because when I first wrote the book, I think D-Wave had the only quantum computer in the world, and it only had a couple of qubits. And there was a lot of argument that it wasn't even actually doing any quantum computing. So practically speaking, there were no quantum computers. And now, we're on the threshold of them. I mean, they still can't crack Bitcoin. They're not that powerful, but they're getting there. And within 3 to 5 years, we're going to have some the quantum computers now can do benchmark stuff, and they can solve mathematical puzzles. But nobody would claim that they're actually commercially ready. But we're getting there, and by 2030, we probably will have a 1 million qubit quantum computer. And God, when that gets combined with AI, it's just trying to imagine what can be done. I can't wrap my mind around it.
Yeah, it's kind of scary in some ways.
Truly, yeah.
You've already mentioned a lot of reviewers have compared your work to Dan Brown.
Yeah, yeah. And Michael Crichton, which I'm also pleased to hear.
Yeah. So, were they conscious influences, or were there any other writers who kind of influenced you in some way?
Well, yeah, definitely. Dan Brown I was consciously influenced by this idea of, I thought what was amazing about the Da Vinci Code was that you could read the book and then go to your computer and look at the painting of the Last Supper and say, "Oh my God, he's right. That is a woman." I mean, that's how delightful, how wonderful. And as Dan Brown said on the beginning of the book, essentially, there's a page before, at the front of the book that says, "This is all true. I'm not making any of this up." And it was based on some kind of flaky conspiracy theory, and the people who wrote the theory tried to sue Dan Brown, and but they lost because the judge said, "Well, if you made this up, you could sue him because you created a fiction; it's your creation. But if it's actual history, you can't sue him." And their position, of course, was that it was actual history. So they'd shot themselves in the foot, and they couldn't do anything about it. But I love the idea that you could have this, this kind of thrill as you're reading, saying to yourself, "This is all true. This is all true. This is controversial, and it's true." And in the original portion, the original printing of the book, there is a in the back of the book, there's a bibliography of a partial bibliography of the works that I relied on when I was writing the book, and they're from scholarly journals, they're from notable archaeologists, and so I wanted people to know, hey, this is grounded in something. There's a lot of make believe here, but it's grounded in some actual history and archaeology and textual criticism. I had since removed it because I didn't want the book to feel like it's only there to make a point, because it's a story. It's a wild ride. People love the ride. So many people wrote to me or did reviews to say that they had read the entire book in a sitting or two. And the best compliment I ever got as a writer was a man who told me that he actually had to call in sick to work because he had to finish the book. He literally couldn't put it down and needed to know what happened. So he just called in sick. And I thought, wow, I never expected. I mean, you'd never dream of that you'd have a reader that hooked. I was tickled pink.
Yeah, that's quite a compliment. So, I mean, yeah, obviously it is very exciting. It's very fast paced, and obviously it's thought provoking. I would say quite controversial, as we've alluded to, because of its subject matter. But what do you ultimately hope that readers will get out of this book, apart from just an entertaining read?
Well, there is a theme there. And in a way, it can be summed up with who is the Finnish Richard Feynman, the physicist, who said, science is just the best way that we have found out not to fool ourselves. And and he also said that the real trick is not to fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. I like to say that every man is exactly clever enough to fool himself. For an idiot, it doesn't take much, but it doesn't take much to fool them, and they don't have, a lot of zoobs. But and for a genius, it would take a lot to fool you, but you're a genius, so you can pull it off. So it's, there's a scene where Edward Fisher is talking to Morgan, the DCIS agent, and he says that he's been fighting a war, and the war he's fighting is against truth by authority. It's kind of that we know what's truth because someone said so, or because it's in a book, or because it's a tradition that we can't question. And to me, um, a lot of the world's ills can be laid at the feet of that idea. That that this whole concept of truth by authority. You know, science is very hesitant to say that we know any truths. We just have, what are at this time reliable models that seem to explain the observable data. And if new data come in that don't fit the models, well, then the models must change. Again, it was Feynman who said, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are, it doesn't matter how beautiful the theory is, if it doesn't fit the experiment, it's wrong. And there's a wonderful humility in that. There's a wonderful humility in saying, I read a story about a scientist who, I can't recall the theory now, but it was quite a celebrated theory that he had come up with. And in his field, there was a lot of buzz, and he was receiving a lot of accolades. And he went to the next big conference in his field, and he went up and he said, I was wrong. I just figured it out. I made some bad assumptions. It had to do with the 10th planet. And he had evidence that seemed to prove that he'd found it. And so that was quite a huge splash. And then he got up at this conference and said, no, you know what? I didn't take into account the nature of the elliptical orbits of the planet. And when I put that data in, the 10th planet just vanished. So, sorry about that. Forget it all. I'm wrong. And he was rightly celebrated for that, because that doesn't happen anywhere outside of science, where people devote, they're getting a lot of credit, they're getting money, they're getting accolades, they're getting fame, and then they turn around and say, no, that's all wrong, forget all that. Where does that happen?
Yeah, I agree. That's very refreshing. It hardly ever happens in religion or religious orthodoxy. It's kind of totally counter to that whole worldview.
Wonderfully, there are people like that. There are people who say, "Oh no, well that I'm gonna have to change my beliefs." But religion in general is really that it's immune to fact. And then the whole point of faith and why faith is held as some kind of great, I can't remember which gospel it is in which Jesus says to doubting Thomas that you've seen me and believe, but how much more wonderful are all these people who are never going to see me and believe. And somehow that's this great virtue of believing things without evidence. Whereas, again, I could say, hanging on to beliefs without evidence is closer to being the root of all evil.
Right. So I'd like to mention the audiobook, which I listened to.
Yeah.
And it's narrated by Seth Andrews, who, for those who don't know, he is the host of the Thinking Atheist podcast.
Yeah, and just a terrific guy. It was so great to work with him, and he has this voice that people call whiskey and chocolate. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I agree. He's got a great voice, and it's actually through him indirectly. That's how I discovered your book, because I was just browsing Audible and I was looking at all the books by Seth Andrews, and I noticed that he narrated your book, but it wasn't a book by him, and that kind of intrigued me.
Yeah, it was a breakout for him, and he was excited to do it, to try, his hand at just being a narrator at something, and so he's very excited. The project was very exciting for both of us.
So, how did he end up collaborating with them?
Well, through the editor Emery, who did Penn Jillette's wonderful documentary, The Aristocrats, and Emery said, "Yes, I'm going to make this happen." I ran into Seth, I think, at a conference somewhere. Same way I ran into Lawrence Krauss. He was speaking in Pasadena, and I boldly went up to him, which is not like me at all, and just said, I've written this book and I'd like to get a blurb from you. And then later on, I got even more ambitious and said, what do you think about doing a foreword? and he was a very busy man. About 6 months later, he finally read it and said, "Yeah, I'll do it. That's great. We'll do this." And so, working with Seth through Emory, you know, Emory just said, I'll donate my time and the studio. Bring Seth in and let's do it." And that was just amazing. I didn't have the resources to do it, and Emory made it happen.
Right. And it's great to know that Seth was a keen supporter of your work.
Yeah, he has been. And of course, it really gave it a leg up because, he has, quite a substantial social media following. So all those people, through him heard about the work. And I think more people were experiencing the story through Seth than through the Kindle and print book at first.
Okay. Speaking of which, so the new edition, which has come out just recently.
Yeah.
Can you tell me how you came up with the cover design?
It's a hint at what you're going to be experiencing. This idea of, as you say, observational time travel. The technology that you see on that picture is from the Large Hadron Collider. That is the particle detector for one of the big experiments. And, the eye obviously represents this ability to see. So I don't know how I got the idea, but just I was looking at the particle detector image, and I had this idea of somehow there's an assassin in the story who has brilliant green eyes, really scary guy. And I thought, can I get his eyes on the cover? And I started playing around with putting eyes on the cover, and then I saw this big circular element in the center, and I went, no, just one green iris right there. And that's how it came about. And I have a friend who designs books and book covers who did a beautiful job of bringing that into reality for me. And I like it. I like its ambiguity, and I like that it says, there's something going on with technology here that has something to do with seeing, and I'm not going to tell you anymore. You're going to have to open the book.
I agree. It's quite a striking image. I quite like it.
Thank you.
So, I sometimes thought when I was reading your book, the Kafir Project felt quite cinematic in style. Do you think this could work as a movie adaptation?
So many people wrote to me or put in their reviews, can't wait for the movie, buy the book now so you can see how the movie didn't get it right. A lot of references to it being cinematic. It could be a movie, but probably not in this world, because the position that it takes regarding, in particular, the historicity of Islam, it's just too hot. It's too controversial. And I mean, it's not, look, a cartoonist made a cartoon with Muhammad's face on it, and he's dead now. I'm not murtad. I'm not an apostate. I never was a believer who moved away. But I mean, Salman Rushdie was a believer who became an unbeliever. And how many decades later he got stabbed? I mean, even after the fatwa was taken off him, somebody jumped on stage and nearly killed the guy. So I think it's too dangerous. I would have to rewrite it so that the story was about the titillation of "could you know," not "do you know." But what if we were faced with this choice where we could know? What would we do? It would be a different story, and maybe you could pull that off. But as it's written now, I think it would be actually dangerous to produce.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think of that. I mean, I was thinking more along the lines of just the film studios might be too conservative to touch this kind of
Well,
thing?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a didactic novel. I did write it to make a point, and the point is not just pro secular. It's anti-theist. And I have you know I found my birth mother some years ago, um, and turned out to be just this delightful woman who I love deeply. I lost her earlier this year to cancer. But she
I'm
was
sorry.
a wonderful, wonderful woman who was a devout Catholic in all the right ways. In all the right ways. Um, Catholicism maintained some of the actual teachings of Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua, that were distorted and corrupted by the Apostle Paul, uh, who turned it into a salvation cult where you had all you had to do was believe. Um, my mother thought that you had to do good. She believed in the letter of James that said, "Faith without acts is dead." So she spent her life trying to help people and animals. That's what it meant. That's what it meant to her, and that's what it means to a lot of people. The price that you pay in losing the power of you know empiricism. You can, that's an argument that many people make. How much do we get from religion opposed to how much we lose? You could. There's a lot of room there for honest people to disagree, but the the book makes the point that controlling people's beliefs is a way of wielding power and is dangerous. And it does that unapologetically. So, it would, yeah, a movie of the book would piss a lot of people off, and that's not always great for your bottom line.
Right. I mean, the the other example I was thinking of before we started recording, we talked a little bit about Philip Pullman and his Dark Materials,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I remember the first of those books was adapted to a film, which was called The Golden Compass, I think.
Yes, yes, I
Although
saw
the
it.
the UK title, the original title, was Northern Lights, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from what I remember, it's been a long time since I watched that movie. I think that the the kind of atheistic message which was present in the original book was kind of lost in translation
I
in the
didn't see
film.
it. I was expecting to see this bold, provocative movie, and I thought, did I miss something when I saw it? I said, yeah, I totally agree with you. It definitely got watered down.
Yeah, so that's why I said probably the studios would be too conservative. It would have to be quite a watered down version of your text, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
and you know, um, I'm a fan of didactic fiction. I love Orwell. I think that Animal Farm and 1984 are amazing. Not to compare myself, I can't hope to ever write anything on that level, but just as an example of didactic fiction that works um, in a lot of ways. Kurt Vonnegut too. I mean, Slaughterhouse-Five is is an anti-war novel. So is Catch-22. So I'm quite fond of books that make a point. But when you're making a controversial point, I think people who identify as atheists in the United States right now is about 5%. There are a lot of people who identify themselves as not affiliated with any particular religion, uh, but they're not. They don't take the position of, I don't see any good reason to believe in a God. And of course, atheism is not making the statement there is no God. Saying, um, I I'm not going to say there is a God because I don't see evidence. I'll happy to change my mind the instant you present me some solid evidence for that thesis. Um, yeah. So I mean, apart from, remember when we had the four horsemen of the apocalypse, when they were calling it the new atheism, and uh, uh, we had Hitchens, of course, was so magnificently the lead spokesman for it, and and Sam Harris was there with his provocative book, and it seemed like, atheism is taking this big turn and it's moving into popular culture and it's gaining momentum, and all that's gone. It didn't really amount to much in terms of swaying popular view. We still only have about 5%, again, 5% declared atheists in the United States. And in my country, it's a practical impossibility to get elected to public office unless you are a theist. You have to be a God believer, or you're out. It's that's it. You're dismissed. You don't even try. There might have been an atheist in Alaska once briefly, but that's in our entire history. That's discounting, of course, the founding fathers who didn't believe in a personal God. They were deists, but they're the only presidents that weren't actually Christians.
Right. It's interesting that, yeah, because I think at least in the UK and in Europe in general, I think we are definitely becoming more secular, because with each census every 10 years, the number of people who self-identify as atheist or agnostic goes up slightly.
Yeah. It's bizarre. It's something like 50% of U.S. citizens believe in angels, and more than that, disbelieve in evolution. There's this really kind of scary anti-science movement. It's stunning, and it's very much an American phenomenon. And I can't say that I understand what's driving it, but it's truly disturbing.
Yeah. Now, there is one more question I wanted to ask you. So, you have alluded to writing a sequel, but do you have any plans for any future writing projects?
Yes, I really enjoy um, the lead character, protagonist, Giffen Reese. I think he's quite unusual. Um, this as an action hero, he's so wonderfully implausible, and I would like to see him do something. And what I'm starting to outline now, in the world of longevity research, because to me that's truly fascinating. We're on the verge of perhaps some tremendous breakthroughs. I think there are people being born now who are going to live to be 150, 200 years old. I have little doubt of that. And they talk about in that field, they talk about escape velocity, and that's this idea of you don't need to live forever. You need to live long enough that the science gets to where we can stop you aging. And that might be 200, 300 years from now. So we need the science to be able to live 200, 300 years so we can get to actual immortality. And it's just, there's so many wonderful questions. And I believe that we are living, you and I, at the end of what will eventually be called something like the age of mortality, the age when people grew old and died. That will be a period of history that's recognized as, having been our story for so long, and then that not being the case anymore. Eventually, growing old will be like dying from a bacterial infection. Wasn't that long ago that an infection was going to kill you, and then we have antibiotics, and now age is going to kill you, and before terribly long, we'll have the answer to that as well. And I want to see Evan in that world.
Yeah, I think that would be fascinating. I think longevity is something I'm really interested in. Cool. Right, I think I've basically asked you everything I wanted to ask you. I mean, I could carry on talking all night, to be honest. But I think you've
It
got
would
some.
be. I would love to do it in a pub over a pint. That would be ideal.
Absolutely. Have you ever been to the UK?
Only through Heathrow. That's it.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let me know if you're ever in the area.
I certainly will.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very honored, and it has been just a delight to speak with you. Thank you again so much.
Oh, thank you.